Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I'm back again today. I tell you, I haven't been live this many times in 1 week than this week, but I'm feeling social. So continuing on the conversations this week about World Mental Health Week and the fact that the theme is movement. I'm very, very happy to be speaking to another beautiful friend of mine, Chris Keisler. But specifically around men, because this is something that Chris is super passionate about. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Chris, so you can introduce yourself to the lovely people watching.
Thank you, Christina. It's lovely to be here, having this deep dive into movement, which really is a gateway into so many things, right? As long as I've known you, which we were trying to figure out the other day, it's probably been about 3 or 4 years, and beyond, really. I'd say maybe 10 years of like introspection and deep thought about what makes us human, and gone on that journey. And yeah, I've arrived at a few things which I think can help. They've certainly helped me. But I have a podcast, which is one of the main things that I love to do. I love to have these conversations and to promote and really dive into the nitty-gritty of life and the experience that we're all having and we're sharing, and the great remembering, awakening, collective shifts that are happening on big scales, which, as you just pointed to, men, movement, and all the things that I've pushed into, which is holding space for men to come back to the circle, to come back to the fire, to come back to the elements, to come back to the land, to come back to each other, and forge bonds, doing uncomfortable things, because that is also an entry point to growth. And I also do a bit of DJing, but it kind of shares the same theme of providing a space that we can dive into those kind of aspects of ourselves that not a lot of spaces it always feels comfortable to. So safe spaces, co-creating safe spaces.
Yes, and I have very much experienced a lot of the practices that you've kind of cultivated and seen that over the years, which has just been really beautiful to see. And I think in conversations we've had before, and the one that we had just before we came on live, is that importance about, I mean, this is for everyone, right? Men and women, but I think specifically for men to reconnect to actually being able to be vulnerable, be able to be open with how they're feeling, because I think the older generations, Gen X and older, have been conditioned to maybe suppress how they're feeling, and maybe move in different ways. And what I love about the work that you're doing is, to your point, it's creating safe spaces to just explore and move through things. Are you noticing a bit of a shift in just the amount of time that you've been working with men and age ranges?
Yes, but also when you're in the thing, it's hard to see the thing. So I'd say yes, but also you know what you know and you don't know what you don't know. So, and also when you look for things, you'll see more of them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a, I'm not sure, but yes, for me, it's a yes.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, because I'm the same. It's like if somebody goes, right, well, look for all things yellow, then you're just going to see yellow things because that's what you're focusing on. You're not looking at other things. But I just generally, in speaking to a lot of practitioners, and it is the world that we're living in, but it just seems that more men's groups are popping up, and more, it seems to be a catching trend of, people in the public eye as well, just generally speaking more openly about, this vulnerability and being able to work through some quite hard emotions. Certainly things like suicide prevention and more awareness around mental health, which is obviously why we're talking, but being able to tap into our innate physicality to be able to kind of come home to ourselves, right? Reconnect to actually, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be having in this human experience. In the spaces that you've created, how have you used movement to create that safe space for people to explore different elements of themselves?
Yes, we all have a body and we can physically see it. So let's start there, really. Like, it's a big entry point to so many other things, so many other aspects that we have, and stories mainly that we have adopted, being conditioned to think like, which affect our beliefs about things. Like, let's just talk about dance. What does it mean to move like a man? Like, to dance like a man? What does that even mean for us? And I think holding that space on a dance floor without any substances, alcohol, which is very rare still now. Yes, it's increasing, and people are more aware of like alcohol being really another mask to
A social lubricant.
for sure. And it's not innately good or bad. It is, but it's also it can hide and do a really good job at hiding what's underneath. So the spaces that I'll create on the dance floor is a really inclusive, and it's inviting people to experiment with their bodies. How does it feel to move this way? And I would love to talk about how it looks on my events and retreats when it's just men, because dance, it's such an amazing tool and practice to just lean into, to understand where you're feeling discomfort and what feels unnatural for you, or like uncomfortable, essentially. So it can trigger emotions, it can trigger feelings, sensations of like, oh, I didn't think men were supposed to move like this. And there's just so much healing inner work that can be done in that space, and it can go very deep also. And I've seen, witnessed, and felt myself just huge transformation on a dance floor, just music. And what it does do amazingly is connect us with our body without the need for story, without the need for the conversation or to try and figure it out or to analyze. It's a very masculine trait to analyze and just figure out and understand certain things, and they may be internal things, but it's also maybe just park that and just see what happens on a dance floor with a drum beat. And I do believe that only certain things can be accessed within dance, and it's probably one of the oldest practices, spiritual pursuits of our lineage, of our kind of timeline of humans. So it's just another tool, like meditation, like breath work, like going to the gym, like whatever your way into feeling better or feeling more connected, or to kind of releasing stress. Like, that needs to be talked about as well. Like, what are people's way in? And movement's a big one. I'd love to segue into what does movement look like for me, and the low hanging fruit, which I believe is the biggest thing anyone can do, and the smallest, simplest thing anyone can do to change their whole life. And I do believe this wholeheartedly. When someone asks me, name one thing that you feel everyone can benefit from and start to do more of, and they can feel better, and it is having a connection with the ground. So removing chairs and coming back into your body with the floor. So coming all the way down to the floor, crossing your legs, and having different positions which you can adopt, which is essentially how we've evolved. And I do, through my work with Tony Riddle, who you likely know of, but since I met him and understood his awareness and practices around natural movement, it's the lens of what happens in nature. What happens when you remove the past 50, 100 years of kind of social norms, not natural norms of environment. And we can talk about this in terms of like a social capacity of what allows men to connect deeper, and it is an environment. When I talk about safe spaces, it's an environment, and it impacts us way more than we, I think, give credit to. So the environment for you at home, you now, me in this van, how am I creating my environment to get my natural need met of movement? And obviously there's other needs like social needs, need community connection. There's obviously food needs, nutrition, like there's sleep needs. There's a spectrum of things, but really you can bring them into like a few pillars of health. Movement's a big one, and it is easier to act your way into a new way of thinking than think your way into a new way of acting. I'll say that again. So it's easier to move or like act, do something with your body into a new way of thinking than think your way into a new way of acting. So if you're at home and you're trying to figure out, oh, what's going to help me, and you're trying to like figure this thing out, it's actually just do the thing and just go move your body, and you will start to think differently. If you notice people that are rigid in their ideologies, into their minds and their beliefs, they're quite rigid, black and white thinking, you'll notice in their bodies they're very stagnant also. So, and this could be a bigger thing that we don't really measure, but for men that feel it's inappropriate to move certain ways other than
I just do that movement,
just rigid movements, it's going to create rigid patterns in your mind, and it's going to be as within so without, with that type of thing. But yeah, acting your way into a new way of thinking, if you are getting caught in your head or just stuck and stagnant in your life, your energy, it's chi, right? We talk about it, you talk about it all the time. It's like your thing, energy in motion, and emotion is that. So when we are overwhelmed with emotion, you move your body, you dance, you go for a walk, or you just move your body. And just to come back, when we bring ourselves to the ground, we will adopt many different positions to move our bodies, to mobilize our hips. And there is so much contraction that happens when you sit in a chair or in the sofa. Not demonizing sofas, but I do think, as I said before, it's like the biggest thing you can change in your life is to have more of a connection with the floor. Any opportunity, you're watching Netflix and you can just bring yourself to the floor and then just mobilize and get your yoga practice in whilst you're having a conversation with someone or watching a talk, whatever it might be. So I like really do believe that's one thing I will preach till the day I die. It's coming back to our bodies, and in this holistic sense of movement that's not so rigid, and that carries over into so many other things.
I love that. I mean, God, you spoke so much to that and crafted it beautifully, because I know for me personally, that movement, and specifically dance, has been huge for me all the way through my life. But I think especially even actually through my grief journey, specifically, because that can make you go in yourself, and just to kind of be able to move through and move expressively. I absolutely do say that dancing has been a key part of my healing, for movement. But I also love what you said about the grounding element, because I don't think this gets talked again about enough, generally speaking. I mean, when I was all over the weekend, I think I was out most of Saturday, and I walked barefoot as much as I possibly could, because knowing the power of grounding, of actually just taking your shoes off and just meet the earth and grounding it. For those that don't know about this grounding thing, can you maybe speak to the benefits of that a little bit more, about the power of grounding for us as humans?
It does amuse me when we talk about grounding. Like it's this, I don't know, new thing or something that is separate. I don't know. The only way we can separate us, nature, us, the earth, is with our language. And I think it can be a way in to raise some eyebrows and be like, oh, grounding. Yeah, I've heard about this. And every time I'm walking, I was at Snowdon, I did, a third of it barefoot. And people were like, oh, yeah, grounding. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, okay, it's cool. I'll take that. But also, there's so much going on there. it's not just about reducing the magnetic frequency that you carry, which there's a great film. I think it might be called Grounding.
I think it's on YouTube, isn't it? We can put a link in
Yeah,
for people to watch
yeah.
if
Put
they're
it in,
curious.
watch it. Like, there's this scene in it where he's looking at this coach load of tourists, and he's like, "What's happening here?" And he's like, "No one's in contact with the floor, and everyone wears these cushioned shoes," which we can also talk about, because this all encapsulates movement, and the shoe is kind of like um, a version. The couch is for our bodies, but the shoe is for our foot. It's kind of like a cast that does separate us from the ground. So ask yourself, like, when are you in contact with the ground? So there is that grounding element. But for me, the biggest aspect is our movement brain. So when our foot moves on the floor, we have sensory feedback, which tells our foot how to correct and adjust appropriately. So you've got balance, you've got support, you've got mobility, and your foot is an absolute like masterpiece. Leonardo da Vinci called it the masterpiece. The human anatomy. It has like 33 articulations, 3 layers of arch muscle, like and 100 plus bones, and it's just so incredible. You think of our hands and how malleable, like we can you use objects and things like that. Well, your feet are exactly the same, and they really should be as dexterous as your hands. So when they make contact with the floor, they're gripping, they're feeling, they're the only thing that is in contact with the floor all the time. So surely you'd want them to be strong, to support you. And what happens when you don't what happens when you don't go to the gym to create strength, to create a kind of friction or resilience? Then you'll become weaker, and it's the same with your feet. So if you don't expose them to the elements, to the ground, to different surfaces, then they're going to become weaker. It's just the natural laws. And I just think it's the low hanging fruit, taking your foot. If it doesn't have to look so extreme, and it can be a real edge for people who don't like their feet, or don't look at their feet, or think feet are weird, or just for some portion of your day, like, shoes aren't a problem. It's what you spend the most time in. And if you're spending the most time covered up, not exposed to light air for them to breathe, like your skin's an organ, it does need to breathe. And then just placing your foot on the floor, maybe it's at home, but just going out for a little outside trot in the morning, and just notice and just tune in, just see how it feels. And there's other things with the feet which I can talk about for
No,
a
I
long
love
time.
it. No, I love it. I just know that it's something that, again, when do people talk about this generally? What's kind of coming up for me, and this is like a theme from all conversations, you pointed at it before, of almost the fundamentals, the like foundational building blocks of our human needs, things like nutrition, hydration, connection, movement, are all such like foundational elements that we can overlook. And I think the same can be said for connecting with the earth, because technology is taking off in such a huge way, which is benefiting us in loads of ways. But in other ways, it's taking us further away from these fundamentals, these like just connect with the earth, and all of the many ways that you've just mentioned there. I think it's just an important thing to highlight and just have people go, oh yeah, well, like, that's a no-brainer. Like, that makes total sense. But we're so conditioned to wear our shoes, and I mean, I know a ton of people that don't like their feet, and oh no, I don't want to let anyone see my feet. And I'm like, why? Like, no one's looking at your feet.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah, I know that it can be socially extreme just to take your shoes off and go for a walk. But I do think it's very low hanging fruit that can change your life. And it is also if you do get it and you understand, okay, this makes sense, then it allows you, and it has allowed me to understand what else have I been wrong about. And then the dominoes start to fall, because what also was I wrong about was how I breathe when I exercise. What also was I wrong about is how I sit on the toilet. those things are like natural, like nothing makes sense except in the eyes of evolution. So if we look at the timeline of human history, we know the modern days is a short period of time. It's like the last word in a 300-page book. And for most of our existence, and this is like the start of the journey for me, was like really understanding what makes sense in nature and how we would have lived outside. Like, where would you want to go if you did live outside? And I just start the like rabbit hole of how I can start to thrive, really, because we do have those needs, and if we're not looking there, then we're a human in suffering. So it is like things like time outside, which again, you're going to move more if you're outside. I think it's around it's over 80% of people in the UK live in urban environments, and most spend less than 10% of their day outdoors. Now, less than 10% of your day is 2 hours, 20 minutes or so. It's quite a long time to spend outside, and I don't think I do that.
No.
I live in a van, and I still like try and do that. But it's a real thing. We spend this time indoors, and what we do when we're indoors, are we sat down? Like, how much time of the day are we actually moving our bodies? And we are our biggest kind of, what's the word? We pull the wool over our own eyes to think that we're doing so much, but it's like, how much movement are we doing really?
True. I was talking to Chris Holmes, our fellow friend, earlier on today about, osteopathy and how actually it's range of motion and movement. And that's the other beautiful thing that's happening through all of our conversations this week is you mentioned there about the constriction that if we're fixed and sedentary, then actually if we are that in the body, then we are that in the mind. And I think there's so much wisdom that we're not really tapping into. And I think it feels like we're going kind of back to ancient practices, back to the fundamentals, because now even just looking at, and I don't know what the percentage of this is, but I'm sure it's high, the majority of us that work at a desk, sat down, staring at a screen all day. Where you think back in history, where obviously before any of this technology existed, we would be working the fields, we would be physically doing things and, in nature and having that outdoor stimulus and all the rest of it. Whereas people are fixating on just one, I suppose, key area, be it a screen, be it digital connections, and not the physicality part. I wanted to, I suppose, segue into then talking about that control. Oh, we've lost you. Your camera's gone off, Chris.
Sorry.
Oh, you're back again.
Checking on battery. This is live.
Like, oh no, he's gone. He's back. It's all good. But yeah, the whole toggling between control and surrender. Because I think especially when we talk about dance, right? And I mean, you took us through a beautiful ecstatic dance hall guiding thing on last Saturday at Beamish Hall. And I think what was lovely about that was just kind of creating that safe space, for even people to acknowledge that they felt self-conscious and maybe a little bit uncomfortable. And when we're uncomfortable, we tend to show that in our body. So yeah, just speaking to that, because I come across a lot of people that are like, no, I need to be controlled and contained. And just if people are listening to this thinking, no, I love control, I like to be in control. What's been your, I guess, witnessing of people, helping them relinquish and maybe just start to, let go a little bit? What have you seen?
I love the question. Something that doesn't come up that much, that people that are holding on control. I would look at, that's the symptom of something, and to ask the why the control, because how much is in your control? Ultimately, you can't control people, their reactions, their responses, traffic, everything outside of yourself. You can control your response, but what's the control, and what's that getting you that you haven't got? And that might be a sense of feeling safe or sure or certainty. So that would be my inquiry into like what is going on underneath the surface. And I guess to touch on some experience of that, people, in my experience, people that do want more control, or they feel like they haven't got enough. Yeah, like what's on the other side of not trying to control? And there's the control. I feel like I'm fully in control of this, and that's a deep responsibility. But have I got control over anything else? The Serenity Prayer, give me the courage to control the things I can, and then the control the things I can, and then the wisdom to know the difference. Well, damn it, what's the other thing? It's like to basically things I can't control, accept the acceptance to the things that I can't control.
Yeah.
So are you accepting the reality of life, which is that you cannot control most things, but you can control this? So yeah, what's in that for people?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time the conversations I have with people is around, and I think you're right, control does have an element of safety, or believing it's more safe, or actually an element of protection. But it's just then when protection becomes a prison, because yeah, it might be perceivably safe, but actually it's hiding you away from all of these experiences that may not be that terrible, and that may just be what you need. And so it's an interesting thing to me, and I think that's why my go-to is moving in the body, because you can't often outthink these things or figure them out in your mind. It is about it's a sensory, somatic, in the body experience that I think almost like awakens something primitive in us that kind of shifts your mindset. I always think about that, of which way round it is, to your point of when you were saying earlier, noticing about actually, well, what if I just did the thing? What if I just, put myself in that position or moved my body in that way, and then sensed, oh, how does that feel? And then reflect on it, because something will shift mentally if we use our body, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think you're bang on. Yeah, it's important to consider, like, how much control do you actually have, and then just noticing when things happen and you feel a sense of out of control, or like things are going not to plan, and what happens.
Oh no, it's going wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, like your judgment and expectation of something is really causing suffering. Undoubtedly, if you have expectation of how something's going to look, or how you think it should look, you're going to suffer, because it's never like that. And what's that relationship you have with life? But yeah, in our movement, and you touched on earlier around how the posture of someone who is perhaps controlling certain things too much, and once you see these things, you can't really unsee them. And I'd say there's a great study to look up or to link to, which I need to read properly, but it's a great study around power postures. And they did just an experiment of certain types of people going into a space and then demonstrating what it would look like to be really powerful, and just signify that they are in control, or like that they are showing up in like their power. And the translation to their emotion and their hormones imbalance and the regulation of their nervous system, like there was just many of these experiments, and it's just like flawless, that you can see the actually carryover of the way you hold your body can influence your mind, and the vice versa, right?
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, we've talked before, it's your energy introduces you before you speak. And because a lot of our communication is non-verbal, it's cues that are getting picked up unconsciously of how somebody holds themselves. Are they open? Are they taking up space? Are they taking up almost so much space that it comes across as almost a little bit too much for some people? Or are people trying to hide and kind of not be seen? And I think I love what you said there about that correlation between, how you physically are showing up and what story is that telling other people about how you feel about yourself and what you're there to do. Are you open and receptive, or are you closed and kind of in that protection mode where, you are subliminally communicating to people to like back off, right? Because it's bringing awareness to that, isn't it? To say, well, how do I want to show up? And how am I being? And how are people relating to the way I'm being, as opposed to, oh, I'm not doing anything. Well, no, we're all doing something, right? We're all carrying ourselves in a certain way.
Yeah, you raise a really important point around language, and it's just a small piece. It really is a small piece of you, and the way you carry yourself, the way you hold yourself, the way you walk in a room is the way you walk through life. And it's like the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. There's a lot of truth in that. And I just would invite in the compassion that needs to be in place when you start to become curious of these things and how they play out. And maybe there's some areas of your life that, you're not fully showing up in, or you're not fully stepping into your power as a human. And it's the adage of that we don't fear our inadequacy, we fear that we're powerful beyond measure. Like, that can be a real thing of like, don't want to play big in this room because I don't want the attention on me. And that's okay. But like, what's the story you're telling yourself there? And what have you kind of learned over time to play small, to fit in, to use your body to signify to others that you don't want like to be a problem? And it's the nice guys that I work with that are that kind of, that kind of feeds into how they act with other people. And it's your body language that acts first and signifies to others. But just on that piece, just to finish, the compassion that's needed to then bring awareness, but acceptance without action is a freeze response. So then what's the next step of like, okay, this makes sense for me. There's a great guy, and I'm going to plug my podcast, James Fish Gill,
Yes.
who I've had on before. This guy's coming back on the 20th of this month, so next Monday. And he always invites this speaking to yourself from maybe the small child, which pretty much that's what's communicating. That's what's trying to play small. That's why the body's moving in this way, because that child is scared, or that child is, not being listened to enough. And he invites in, like, it's okay. Like, it makes sense that you do this. It makes sense that you feel this way. It makes complete sense. When I say those words, it's like the compassion that kind of fills that space of like, it does make sense that you do this, and it's okay. But what now? Like, what's the action I'm going to take?
I love that. And I think it's so important to underline and raise that point, because all of this work we're doing, right, it's about awareness, and it's about, observing for ourselves, oh, okay, this is what I'm experiencing. But often what we see is that when we become more aware, then that's when the judgment comes in of like, we shouldn't do something, as opposed to, well, of course I do all of these things. I have conditioning. I have things that have happened. And so it's like the first thing is awareness, yes, but the second thing is about being compassionate, to actually let yourself off the hook, to say, look, I'm fully human, and I'm just experiencing these things. And it's totally understandable that I act in these ways, but how might I act differently? How might I explore this differently now that I have awareness? Because ultimately what that gives is conscious choice. It's coming out of autopilot, and it's coming into more, okay, I noticed that about myself. What if I played this part? What if I walked into the room with my shoulders back and more open? What if I engaged with people, physically a little bit more? Because then it's got that playful curiosity, and that's how we can shift kind of the way that we show up, right? But I love that. Yeah.
Well, it's the awareness, then comes the authenticity piece, which I grapple with the kind of word, because what does it truly mean to be authentic? However,
Yeah,
it does allow you access to more authenticity. So when you have the awareness, can you act from that place? And that is it, authentic action. It's taking authentic action in your life, because
thanks very
those
much.
two, those two come, they come hand in hand. Like it is, action is, there's a lot of doing in the world, but it is in the action, it is in the doing.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah, it's bringing it into being. I think the other thing that I would just say, just to kind of bring it all back as well, that, and this has also been a theme, ironically, through the week talking to people, is parts work. So
Mm,
IFS, internal family systems. And we've spoken about it with a few people, but to your point, in our evolution as humans, in our evolution in our lifetime, it's about loving all of these parts of ourselves. The child part that maybe has some stuff that is not yet healed, and that's why we go into control and protection. And I think this is the lifetime work, right? it's
mm,
it's about, actually, there are hidden parts of ourselves, but that's a big part of awareness and compassion of, I found a poem that I'd found a few years ago, and I created like a little reel out of it because it meant so much to me. um and yeah, it was called "I Have Been 1,000 Women." And I think it's the same for men, right? You've been 1,000 different people in your lifetime, but they've all led you to who you are now. And so they all deserve your love. They all deserve, you did what you did, because that's where you were and what you were experiencing at the time. And that's okay. I think it's almost that bringing all of those parts to yourself to kind of say, right, I'm all of those parts and none of those parts all at the same time. That's how we
mm.
kind of give ourselves room to breathe and to keep evolving, right?
Yeah, to keep evolving. I think it all comes down to that point: radical love, radical self-love. Like, can you love all of you without shying away from accepting or not wanting to look at the parts of you that feel not enough, feel unworthy, feel disgusting, or feel shame around? Because we all have them. That is what Carl Jung would call the shadow. And
Mm-hmm.
when we don't accept, when we don't bring love, which is just the pure acceptance and care,
Mm-hmm.
into those parts, then what are we doing? What are we doing? Like, what are
Yeah,
we doing
but
in the world?
that's what constricts our movement, and it constricts our growth because we're shutting some part of us down. I think that's well said. And I know that, God, I've said this before, if I could write a prescription for everybody, it would be to give ourselves more self-compassion, because I think,
Mm,
generally speaking, we all suck at it. I do. I've got to remind myself all of the time
mm,
to kind of just go, just ease up on yourself. You're not going to like fail because, beating yourself into submission is not helping. To
what
actually
does
just be
being
kinder.
compassionate to you look like?
Oh, good question, Chris. Being, I think, compassionate and loving towards myself is to give that softness and that loving awareness. I mean, I talk about compassionate curiosity. If I notice that there's that voice in my head going, "Oh my God, I can't believe you did that thing, Christina," or like, "Oh my," that judgment voice that comes up, instead of trying to push it away or, kind of allow to be browbeaten by it, what I try and do, and I don't always do it, but it's a practice, right? It's everyday practice to
Mm,
actually bring awareness to it and say, "Oh, thanks for letting me know. Like, I see you." And often I'll use humor. I'll use humor just to kind of, you know, dissolve it. And so that's where, as well, the movement, the dance, all of that is part of, actually, when we get stuck by that judgment, I can feel physically stuck. So often that loving kind of energy will be to move my body, will be, I'm going to take my body out for a walk. I'm going to take my body to a salsa class. I'm going to take my body into the sea because I love it, because I want to nourish it and I want to give it what it needs. So it's more of a feeding as opposed to a berating. Like it's that loving energy rather than the scolding.
Sounds nourishing.
It is. And it's taken, you go through dark parts. We've talked about this. You go through chapters where, you think you've got it figured out, and then something happens where you find yourself going back through that beration. And sometimes that's where that's where the practice comes in, to keep that muscle, strong, keep it exercised. That, no, come on, self-compassion is a total practice. We can't just...
Yeah, it is a practice, and there's the word passion in there, right, as well. So for me, it's like a fire. It's a real like charge of energy that is like really surrounding myself with forgiveness, and that kind of element of acceptance, forgiveness. And this great quote that's been floating around, used it at the weekend on the Snowdon hike that we've not talked about, but we can do briefly. That forgiveness is letting go of hope for a better past. And it's it really can be that, like, I've done something that hasn't been favorable, or I didn't want to do. There's a regret there, there's remorse, but like, okay, how quick can I come to forgiveness, knowing that I'm also going to change something or to act on something. So it is like really accepting. It's just another word for acceptance and love, to really accept something that wasn't ideal, but it's happened. Letting go of that.
No, I love that. I know, the forgiveness podcast that I sent you,
I need to listen.
Just had that was one of his main quotes about exactly what you just said. Yeah, it was exactly that.
That's not where I got it from.
Oh, really? Well, it's exactly that. All about forgiveness, in terms of, like, what's gone is done, and we can't change it, and so we have to make peace with it, right? Otherwise, if we dwell on it, then it's the literal way of banging your head against a brick wall. Conscious of the time, but obviously I know, and I love where our conversations go, Chris, all of our conversations. But as obviously, just to come back round to the work that you do with men, and obviously you're near Snowdon at the moment, and you spoke there about the beautiful hike that you've been on. I wonder if you'd like to share a little bit about that, because that was all men that you've been with, wasn't it?
So it was the first gathering, and you have been such a support, and from the start, like 2.5 years ago, maybe a bit more, when I was like, I'm doing it, I'm just going to start it. It was called the Being Human community, and it was about like doing values work and archetypes and just sitting around the fire with other men, and you were such a big help. So thank you for really sticking by my side throughout that, because I think you saw like the energy that I wanted to put into it and to where it could go, and it's going somewhere.
It's growing and going.
Just launched the merchandise on the
website.
I
know, I saw. I've been looking at your website, and it's updated, and I just love it.
Still needs a bit of tweaking. So it was the first. I have a men's community online. There's close to 20 men in there at the moment, and people come and go. Of course, it's a very easygoing space, but also action and self leadership driven, but about education as well. And it's also very democratic. We vote on topics and we have conversations. People call me into things as well. It's like I'm in there with the men. It's not just me coaching. It's like we're in a community, and it's just gone on an interesting journey, but arrived at a very solid, stable, truth-led, honest conversation whenever we show up, which have like 3 calls a month, and there's like a structure, but it's also very very fluid as well. So I said I'd do 2 meetups per year, and then I put the first one on this weekend just gone, and 5 other guys said they're available and just actioned it. Like I'd only met one of the guys before in person,
Oh.
and it was just so overwhelmingly like just perfect. Like there was such a solid essence to the group, and we just held space for each other. It was like it was a hike at the end of the day. Like we really had a mission on our hands to do a challenging route, to camp out on the hills and to have that as like the guided kind of journey. But it was also about taking the time for ourselves, like in a really healthy and nutritious way, eating nice food and being around the fire, having conversation, it being loose, but also holding. I was there as a space holder to really unite the group and to invite in on some practices that
Mm.
have worked for me and can work in that space, just to really bring us all into a bit more truth and just radical honesty. And it just worked. It was the format was amazing. I chose a route, and yeah, there was opportunities to make it harder, make it kind of less wild, but it just, yeah, it was just amazing and just happened so organically. It was powerful. Um, and yeah, it is about that, isn't it? It's just coming together and just doing something super challenging, which we know, but do we do enough of? Do we create these experiences? Do we say yes to the things that are there? And yeah, it's not comfortable. Like it wasn't like the most easygoing of times, but
Mm-hmm.
the most rewarding. Like they didn't promise it will be easy, but they promised it will be worth it, and it always is. Because the reflections that have come from that and the challenges that we invited into each other
Mm.
to also like, oh, maybe there's something here for you, and can I offer some feedback, or maybe a challenge.
Mm.
And then the men have left, like certain men have like, okay, I'm really gonna like action that, and I'm sitting with this, and this is, cause it's not just about going away for 2 days and just forgetting about everything. It's about, how do I want to go back and show up? And this is the same in any retreat or experience. It's like we're not just coming away for ourselves.
Mm.
We care so much about our loved ones and our work and our mission in life. So it's, how can we go back and show up so much better, and with new insights, with new information on how to do those things.
Mm.
So yeah, who knows where it's going, but it feels good right now.
I just love it, and I love just seeing the evolution of it, and just what you're doing, Chris, because it's just going from strength to strength, and your passion is just unwavering. And I think what I love about it is it's just been an organic evolution, because you've just kind of gone, do you know what? I don't know what this is going to look like. It's like my favorite David Bowie quote that I know I've shared before. It's like, I don't know where I'm going from here, but I promise you it won't be boring. Like it's just got that adventurous feel about it, which keeps it very alive, because it's not overly structured. It's, you know, again, it's like there's a framework, of course, but it's very playful within that. And I think that's what's come across. And you speak so from the heart with it. You can just tell that you are living, breathing, eating this. This is a way of life for you. And I think that's where your authenticity does radiate out of you. And it's just such a joy to see. So thank you for just continually pushing outside your comfort zone, because you do. I see that you do. So it's inspiring.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
No,
Appreciate your words.
absolutely. Yeah. Oh. So if people are interested in this, you know, for any, obviously, men that are watching, women that are watching that love their men, and maybe see that there's maybe some constriction going on, or kind of actually maybe their partners, brothers, friends are kind of going, oh, I think they could do with maybe a little bit of Chris. Where do they come to find you?
A little bit of me for
A little
everyone.
bit of you.
Well, even if also, I love speaking to this piece around, even if you don't resonate with me, like I know so many spaces and other things that are happening that you may resonate with. So it doesn't have to necessarily be this. It might be too much or too little. You might want a lot more, or, you know, there's so much.
Choices.
There's, because the podcast that I do, I've connected with so many people who are holding amazing space and inviting people into, step into the collective shift that's happening, or to collective remembering of what it means to be a sovereign being, or choose your words, come back to yourself, like be connected, to be empowered. So yeah, how can people get involved? Just reach out. Instagram, I can reply to messages, or you'll find me. The foundation is called Men of Earth, online community. I've also got a retreat next month in June in Sussex, which is near Brighton, and then one in August, at the end of August. And yeah, there's going to be different iterations, and the community is pay what you feel. So there's 3 different price points, and it's really not a lot of money for the content, for the access to a group of men that are really going to care about your growth as much as they care about theirs. So yeah, it's exciting time, but
it
just
is very
taking
exciting.
it slow.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for joining me tonight and sharing all of that. We'll make sure that all those links are around so people can access them. But yes, I shall wish everyone a goodbye. And Chris, you stay put, because I'm just going to say goodbye offline. Thanks for everyone who's joined.